dog lay beside Pope Francis in his final moments when the Pope whispered something into his ear. Words so unexpected that even the priests nearby were left in stunned silence. So what exactly did he say? First, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The first time anyone noticed the battered dog was late one evening, long after tourists had disappeared from the Vatican's cobbled pathways. His ribcage jutted sharply beneath matted fur, and he moved like a shadow through the gardens, one eye half shut from an old wound. Most who spotted him shooed him away with impatient claps or tossed pebbles, seeing only a filthy stray too dangerous to approach. He didn't have a name back then. He had no reason to trust humans. Every hand that reached toward him had only struck or pushed him away. Every promise of food ended with someone yanking it away just for cruel amusement. Months of hunger, beatings, and sleeping on cold stone had taught him that survival meant suspicion. So when a man in white robes knelt down and offered him a scrap of bread just inside the Vatican gardens, the dog did what experience had taught him. He bared his teeth and lunged, but the man didn't flinch or recoil. He simply smiled, the weathered lines around his eyes deepening, and murmured something in Spanish. The language didn't matter. His tone spoke of gentleness, of patience. Pope Francis, for that's who the man was, reached forward again, this time dropping the bread at the dog's paws before settling back on the stone step. He made no demands, no sudden movements, just waited as if he had all the time in the world. The stray didn't trust him. Why should he? He growled low in his throat, but the scent of real food was too powerful to ignore. After what felt like hours, he crept forward, snatched the bread, and retreated, keeping his one good eye fixed on the stranger. The next night, the man returned. Different bread, same open palm, the same patience. And the night after that, and the night after that. In a city of ancient marble and towering saints, this broken creature had found the one soul who wouldn't turn him away. The change wasn't immediate. Days passed before he allowed the man to touch his matted fur. But when he finally did, something shifted inside him. Something buried beneath years of survival and fear. Pope Francis had opened a space the dog hadn't realized still existed, a place for trust. When Vatican security protested, "A stray? Holy Father, it's dangerous," the Pope's answer came without hesitation. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he said simply, scratching behind the dog's torn ear, "especially those who've been hurt the most." Against all protocol, against every cautious voice, Francis personally ordered the dog's rehabilitation. He assigned caretakers, trainers, even a veterinarian to help heal the broken animal. In time, the stray would become Leo, an official protector of Vatican grounds. But in those early moments, it was just an old man, a wounded dog, and a connection that no doctrine, no tragedy, and no death could ever sever. Leo's transformation wasn't swift or easy. At first, he resisted everything: commands, touch, even the offered comforts of warm bedding and regular meals. The handlers brought in by Vatican security knew how to train disciplined, purebred dogs, not creatures built from pure survival. More than once, Leo lashed out when a gloved hand moved too quickly or a leash pulled too tight. More than once, the trainer suggested giving up. "He's feral," one muttered after a particularly rough session. "No discipline, no potential. It's wasted effort." But Pope Francis wouldn't hear it. He visited often during Leo's early rehabilitation, sitting quietly on sun-warmed stones in the private garden where they housed the dog. No fanfare, no entourage, just the Pope in his simple white cassock, hands resting in his lap, waiting. Not commanding, not expecting, waiting. Leo would circle him warily at first, body stiff, eyes darting for threats. But each day, the distance between them shrank. A few steps closer, a few minutes longer of eye contact, a few seconds more before the instinctive growl died in his throat. Then one morning, as gentle light spilled across the garden, Leo approached on his own. He pressed his scarred head against the Pope's knee and stood there, trembling slightly but not moving away. It wasn't submission, it was trust, fragile but real. Everything changed after that moment. The Pope insisted Leo receive formal canine training. Like any other guardian of the Church, he said. His decision stirred controversy among the Swiss guards and Vatican administrators. "Astray as an official Vatican dog," one scoffed. "It's undignified." "That animal can never be trusted," argued another. "What if he attacks during a public audience? What if he lunges at a diplomat?" But Francis remained unmoved. "If we cannot trust the redeemed," he said quietly, "then we cannot call ourselves servants of God." Reluctantly, Leo entered the training program. The beginning was rocky. Basic commands often dissolved into stubborn standoffs. Authority figures who barked orders were met with blank stares or defiant retreats. Yet gradually, Leo adapted. His street-honed intelligence turned toward understanding. His senses, once tuned for detecting threats in alleys, recalibrated for reading crowds and sensing tensions. What Leo lacked in pedigree, he made up for with a loyalty so fierce it unnerved his handlers. Unlike other working dogs who waited for commands, Leo anticipated needs. He would position himself near elderly pilgrims without prompting, shadow priests carrying relics, or step between the Pope and strangers during public audiences. Not with aggression, but with a quiet, natural vigilance that required no orders. Vatican insiders began whispering that Leo wasn't just trained, he was called. A creature who hadn't merely learned obedience, but who had absorbed Francis's heart for protection and compassion. Within a year, Leo officially joined the Vatican security detail. His once patchy coat now gleamed black in the sunlight. His formerly skeletal frame carried strength and dignity. A custom harness bore a simple embroidered patch, Custos Fidelis, faithful guardian. And while other guards bowed, saluted, and recited protocols, Leo needed no ritual. When Pope Francis passed him in the gardens or during blessings, he would pause just briefly, his eyes meeting the dog's, a silent exchange carrying more than any ceremony could express. From the filthy back streets of Rome to the sacred halls of St. Peter's, Leo's journey wasn't marked by bloodlines or training certificates. It was defined by a hand offered without conditions and a loyalty born from healing that few ever truly understand. The news spread through the Vatican like a whispered prayer on the evening of April 20th. Pope Francis's condition, long fragile, had suddenly worsened. Doctors moved quietly, in and out of Domus Sancti Marthae with hushed urgency. The clergy spoke in lowered voices. Candles flickered in every chapel. No formal announcement came, but the atmosphere, heavy with anticipation of loss, spoke for itself. Inside his modest suite, surrounded by the simple possessions he had always preferred over luxury, Pope Francis rested against a stack of pillows. His breathing was shallow, his face pale against white sheets. He had refused transfer to the Apostolic Palace or hospital wing. "I came to serve among ordinary people," he had said, smiling faintly, when offered grander accommodations. "I will finish my journey the same way." Cardinal Giovanni Battista, his closest aide, leaned near the bedside, carefully arranging rosary beads between the Pope's frail fingers. Sister Maria, who had served at Domus for decades, hovered nearby, offering sips of water between whispered prayers. Just after midnight, the Pope stirred and spoke. "Bring him to me," he whispered. Battista leaned closer. "Your Holiness? Who should we bring?" The Pope's lips curved into a ghost of a smile. "Leo." The room fell silent. The Swiss guards exchanged uncertain glances. Animals were never permitted in the papal quarters, especially at such a sacred hour. Battista hesitated. "Perhaps he could wait in the courtyard, Holy Father. Protocol." "No." Though barely audible, Francis's voice carried unmistakable authority. "I want him here. He has earned it." For a moment, tradition battled compassion. Sister Maria gently touched the cardinal's arm. "He's asking for comfort," she whispered, "not ceremony." Batista bowed his head in reluctant agreement. Minutes later, a young Swiss guard in ceremonial uniform was dispatched to retrieve Leo from his night post in the gardens. The dog had been unusually restless all evening, refusing to settle in his favorite spot beneath the olive trees. He stood immediately when the guard approached, ears alert, as if he'd been waiting for this summons. The journey through the silent Vatican was surreal. Statues of saints loomed in the shadows, their stone faces bearing witness to something ancient yet new. Candles flickered inside chapels. The few priests still awake stepped respectfully aside as Leo padded beside the guard, a silent acknowledgement that tonight rules must bend to accommodate something greater. At the door to Domus Sancta Martha, the guard hesitated, then gestured Leo inside. For a heartbeat, the dog paused on the threshold, muscles tense as he read the room's energy. Then, with quiet purpose, he crossed into the chamber where his oldest friend waited. The door clicked softly behind him, sealing away the world outside. Within the room, only whispered prayers. The gentle tick of a wall clock measured the passing moments. Amber lamplight pooled across the stone floor, casting long shadows that seemed to move like silent witnesses. Leo stood motionless for a breath, head slightly lowered, as if giving reverence. His nose twitched, catching the familiar scent, now laced with something else, something final. No one called him forward. No command guided him. Only the gravity of loyalty pulled him toward the narrow bed. Deliberately, he crossed the room, his paws making no sound against the cool floor. The gathered clergy parted without speaking, some crossing themselves, others brushing at sudden tears. It wasn't simply a dog entering a sick room. It was the physical embodiment of devotion so profound it seemed to transcend even the Vatican's ancient traditions. Pope Francis stirred at Leo's approach. His tired eyes opened, searching until they found the familiar silhouette of his friend. A flicker of joy crossed his face, briefly stronger than the pain. "Leo," he breathed, the word barely audible. The dog paused at the bedside, waiting as he always had, seeking permission before approaching further. With trembling fingers, the Pope reached outward, his hand wavering in the space between them. Leo responded by gently resting his head against Francis's palm. He made no sound, no dramatic display. He simply pressed close, anchoring the man who had once anchored him. For a long moment, no one moved. Sister Maria covered her mouth, unable to hold back a soft sob. Even Cardinal Batista, hardened by years of Vatican politics, felt his vision blur with unexpected tears. The Pope's weathered hand found the spot behind Leo's ear that he had scratched countless times before. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as if memorizing the sensation. "My brave one," he murmured in Spanish, his voice a thread of sound. "Mi buen muchacho." Leo shifted slightly, leaning closer, his warm breath ghosting across the Pope's wrist. There was no anxiety in his posture, no fear, only presence, the kind of steady, unconditional presence that asks nothing and gives everything. Outside, bells marked the first hour past midnight. Somewhere in the vast basilica, monks chanted ancient prayers for the dying. But within this small room, Leo offered the most powerful prayer, one of silent companionship, faithful love, and the unspoken promise to remain until the end. The Pope closed his eyes again, peace settling over his features. His breathing slowed, deepened. Around him, the world seemed to hold its breath. Leo didn't move. He remained pressed against the bed, eyes half closed, completely still, except for the occasional gentle sweep of his tail against the floor. A heartbeat in the silence. No royal guard, no armored knight, No ancient ritual could have offered greater comfort in that final hour than this once broken creature who had learned to trust again and who now knew only how to stay. Time stretched and contracted in that quiet chamber, measured not by clocks, but by increasingly fragile breaths. The Pope's fingers now barely moved against Leo's fur, yet the connection between them seemed stronger than anything the world outside could understand. The gathered clergy remained at a respectful distance, prayers falling from their lips in hushed cadence. Cardinal Batista clutched his rosary so tightly the beads left marks on his palm, but he made no move to intrude. Sister Maria dabbed at silent tears, watching the scene unfold with reverent awe. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then, with effort that seemed almost unbearable, Pope Francis stirred once more, his frail hand cupped behind Leo's ear, drawing the dog's massive head closer. Leo lifted himself slightly, ears forward, but body still, his gaze fixed unwaveringly on the Pope's face. A whisper escaped Francis's lips, so faint that Sister Maria instinctively leaned forward, but caught only fragments, soft Spanish syllables carried on barely their breath. Guarda, aquellos que se pierden, lleva la luz, nunca abandones la bondad. Guard those who are lost, carry the light. Never abandon kindness. No one could capture every word, but everyone present felt it. The weight of a final commission, given not to cardinals or bishops or world leaders, but to a scarred soul who had known humanity's cruelty and its grace. Leo remained perfectly still, absorbing the Pope's breath against his fur, as if the words themselves were seeping into his very being. After the whisper faded, Francis smiled, a tired, knowing smile, full of peace and a kind of triumphant sadness. His hand settled heavily onto Leo's neck. His chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate rhythm. Outside the window, a gentle breeze stirred the curtains. Guards stationed along the corridors later said they felt a sudden hush sweep through the building, a stillness so complete it seemed the very stones held their breath. Inside, the Pope's breathing grew shallower. His eyelids fluttered closed. Leo, sensing the change, adjusted his position with careful dignity. He pressed closer, his flank against the bed frame, his muzzle resting atop Francis's limp hand. Cardinal Batista stepped forward, voice trembling as he made the sign of the cross over the Pope's forehead, murmuring the final prayers for a soul passing from this world. But it was Leo's response that would forever mark the memories of all who witnessed it. As the final prayer faded into the heavy air, Leo lifted his head slightly and gazed into the Pope's face. He released a sound unlike any bark or whine, a low, deep-throated hum that vibrated with sorrow, love, and understanding beyond human language. Some would later say it sounded like mourning. Others felt it was like prayer. Those who truly knew Pope Francis understood it was farewell. The Pope's chest rose one final time, then fell, and did not rise again. The monitors beside the bed released a soft final tone. Sister Maria pressed shaking hands to her mouth. Cardinal Batista bowed his head, tears falling freely now. Leo remained motionless, the Pope's hand still cradled beneath his muzzle, not nudging it, not pawing at it, simply staying, as he always had, as he always would. In the days to come, thousands would mourn. Eulogies would be spoken in every language on earth. But in that small, dim room, it was a battered, stray-turned guardian who received the Pope's last words and carried them silently into the world beyond marble walls and golden thrones. The news of Pope Francis's death spread through the Vatican like a solemn wave, touching every corridor, every chapel, every heart. Bells that had stood silent for years rang out, their deep tones cutting through the night. Candles appeared in windows. Choirs assembled in hushed urgency. Yet inside the Pope's chamber, there was only stillness. Leo remained exactly where he was, pressed against the bed, his body a silent sentinel beside the man who had first seen him not as a problem, but as something worthy of salvation. The clergy moved carefully around him, their footsteps muffled, unwilling to disturb the sacred tableau. It was immediately clear to everyone that Leo would not be forced away, not by protocol, not by tradition. His vigil was holy in its own right, and even the highest-ranking cardinals instinctively knew better than to interfere. Sister Maria approached first, kneeling beside Leo, murmuring soft Latin prayers as she placed rosary beads between the Pope's fingers. She tried gently coaxing the dog aside so they could prepare the body properly, but Leo gave a low, mournful whine and pressed closer. "It's all right, dear one," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's with the angels now." After several attempts, Cardinal Battista made an unprecedented decision. Leo would stay during the initial preparations. It simply felt right, though no protocol covered such a situation. Attendants worked with reverent efficiency, cleansing and anointing the Pope's body for the ceremonies to come. Leo shifted only enough to allow them access, his eyes tracking every movement. When Francis was finally dressed in the simple white vestments he had requested, far less ornate than traditional papal funeral garb, Leo lifted his head slightly, as if inspecting this final dignity afforded to his friend. When the time came to move the body to the hall, where mourners would pay their respects, Leo finally stood. Slowly, stiffly, as if grief had settled into his very joints. He rose and followed the small procession at a respectful distance. No leash guided him. No command directed him. He simply knew where he belonged. The corridors of the Vatican, usually bustling even at night, fell completely silent as they passed. Guards stood at attention. Nuns bowed their heads. Workers crossed themselves. And at the rear, padding quietly, came Leo, the faithful guardian. At the Basilica, preparations were already underway for the lying in state. Massive floral arrangements lined the aisles. Rows of chairs awaited the flood of mourners from across the globe. A young Swiss guard knelt before Leo at the threshold and whispered gently, "This is as far as you may go, brave one." Leo sat at the entrance, posture dignified, eyes fixed on the Pope's body as it was carried to the altar. He made no attempt to follow further, seeming to understand, as he always had, where duty ended and reverence began. Early pilgrims arriving at dawn caught glimpses of the black dog sitting alone at the great doors of St. Peter's. Whispers spread rapidly. The Pope's dog. Some knelt to pray beside him, others simply wept at the sight. There were no official statements about Leo, no press releases or explanations. His presence remained unexplained, unofficial, yet somehow more powerful than any formal tribute. In the days that followed, as the world streamed into Rome to say goodbye, they would remember not just the man who had led with humility and grace, but also the silent guardian who remained faithful even beyond death. The week that followed blurred into ceremony and sorrow. World leaders, royalty, and ordinary pilgrims filled St. Peter's Square, their candles creating rivers of light in the Roman twilight as choirs sang ancient hymns of farewell. Through it all, Leo remained constant, a silent silhouette at the Basilica's threshold. He sat unmoving day after day, in sunshine and rain, never wandering from his post. Vatican guards, touched by what they had witnessed the night of the Pope's passing, ensured fresh water and food were discreetly placed nearby. Leo accepted these necessities with quiet dignity, but his focus never wavered. His world had contracted to a single purpose, honoring a promise made in whispers. Visitors noticed him immediately. Murmurs passed through the lines of mourners in dozens of languages. "That's the Pope's dog." Photos circulated widely, though the Vatican never officially acknowledged his presence. They didn't need to. Leo's silent vigil spoke its own truth. On the second day of public mourning, a group of school children approached him cautiously. A little girl, perhaps 6 years old, knelt beside Leo and placed a single white daisy between his paws. He lowered his head slightly, allowing her small hand to stroke his ears before she ran back to her parents. An elderly woman with tears streaming down her lined face whispered a prayer over him, her trembling hand hovering briefly above his head in blessing. For many, Leo became a living symbol, a tangible reminder of the Pope's teachings about compassion, loyalty, and the quiet acts of love that changed the world far more than grand pronouncements ever could. Within Vatican walls, debates unfolded behind closed doors. Protocol dictated that Leo be removed once the funeral ceremonies concluded. The Basilica was a sacred space, not a shelter, some argued. Security concerns were raised, tradition was invoked. But Cardinal Battista stood firm. He was the Holy Father's last companion, he said simply to a gathering of senior clergy. If Pope Francis taught us anything, it was to see beyond appearances to the heart beneath. Leo stays. And so an unprecedented decision was made. When Pope Francis was finally laid to rest in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, his chosen resting place away from the grandeur of papal tombs, Leo was not sent away. He was given a place, quietly and without fanfare, among the sacred halls he had guarded so faithfully. No title, no official role, just Leo, a once invisible stray, now standing as a living testament to a life dedicated to compassion. In the weeks following the funeral, as Rome slowly returned to its rhythms and the world turned its attention to selecting a new pontiff, Leo remained. No longer stationed rigidly at the Basilica's grand entrance, he found a quieter purpose, one no human could have assigned him. Each morning, as sunlight spilled through stained glass onto ancient marble, Leo would walk the aisles of Santa Maria Maggiore, not as a guard, but as a companion. He would pause beside those deep in prayer, linger near pilgrims who wept alone, sit quietly by elderly visitors who needed rest but were too proud to ask. He never demanded attention or affection. He simply existed, a quiet presence that brought comfort to the grieving and companionship to the lonely without expectation. Word spread, though few outside Vatican City knew the full story. Visitors spoke of a blessed dog who seemed to know exactly who needed him most. Some described feeling a profound peace settle over them when Leo rested nearby. Others said their burdens felt lighter after spending just moments in his company. For the clergy, Leo became more than a reminder of Pope Francis's final days. He embodied what the Pope had spent a lifetime teaching, that the smallest acts of kindness move mountains, and that true service happens quietly, without fanfare, far from cameras and crowds. No plaque marked Leo's presence. No official announcements were made. But the priests of Santa Maria Maggiore left a small woven mat near the altar, Leo's place. His presence became as natural as the scent of incense, as expected as the flicker of votive candles. Though no human voice proclaimed it, those who visited understood. Leo had received a new mission, not to protect a figurehead or guard a throne, but to watch over something greater. The invisible wounds carried in silent hearts, the fragile hopes held by pilgrims seeking grace. Leo was no longer just a guardian of a man. He had become a keeper of faith itself. One evening, months after the funeral, as twilight painted the Basilica in violet and gold, a young seminarian slipped quietly into the pews. His black cassock hung loosely on his frame, as if the cloth itself carried the weight of his doubts. Matteo, a boy from Naples, who had once dreamed of changing the world through faith, now sat empty and lost, unable to find the God he had once felt so near. He didn't pray. He didn't even kneel. He simply sat, head bowed, fists clenched, too ashamed to weep in such a sacred place. Across the aisle, unnoticed at first, Leo watched. The dog rose from his mat, stretching slowly, age evident in his careful movements. Without hurry, he padded toward the broken young man. Not rushed, not hesitant, as if pulled by an invisible thread that only he could feel. Mateo barely registered the soft sound of approaching paws until Leo stood beside him. He turned, startled, but Leo made no demand for attention or acknowledgement. Instead, with the same gentle dignity he had once shown the Pope himself, Leo lowered his head and rested it against Mateo's knees. For a moment, the young man sat frozen in disbelief. Then the dam broke. Mateo covered his face with his hands and wept. Harsh, raw sobs that came from a place too deep for words. And Leo remained pressed against him, immovable, his warm presence the only anchor in a storm of doubt and grief. Later, when another seminarian asked what had happened, Mateo struggled to explain. "I don't know," he said simply, wiping red-rimmed eyes. "But for the first time in months, I felt that God hadn't forgotten me." From that night forward, Leo became more than a memory. He became a bridge, a silent, steadfast messenger carrying Pope Francis's final commission: to guard the lost, to bring light, and to offer hope where words had failed. He needed no grand cathedral, no sermon in his honor. Leo served simply by being present, as he always had, as he always would. Have you ever witnessed an animal reach a part of someone's heart that no human words could touch? If you could whisper one final message to a faithful companion like Leo, what would it be? Do you believe that sometimes the souls we rescue end up rescuing us in return? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. If this touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that loyalty, kindness, and quiet faith never truly die. Check out our other incredible canine stories appearing on your screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another brand new video.